Thanks for tuning in to the Big Money Investor Show with Jim Ingersoll, where we talk about the best strategies for you to create cash flow and long-term wealth. Investing like the very top investors. Visit us online at www.bigmoneyinvestor.com and enjoy today's show.
Welcome to the Investor Success Podcast. I am Jim Ingersoll, and I'm excited to have you along today. This show was created for real estate investors looking to increase their deal flow, improve their cash flow, and increase their net worth. I am Jim Ingersoll, and I'm your host for the podcast today. I'm also the founder of the Investor Success Mastermind, where I get the pleasure of helping investors all over the country invest in real estate and grow their investing businesses the right way. You can learn more about what we do at theinvestorsuccessmastermind.com. I created this podcast to motivate and inspire you to invest in real estate the right way and enjoy the benefits of creating really great deals. And we have an outstanding show for you today with a phenomenal author and a former FBI negotiator that you're going to love hearing from today. If you are listening in your car or at the gym or somewhere like that today, you're going to want to come back and listen to this one again. If you're at home or in your office, grab your laptop or a notebook and a pen because you're going to want to take notes. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Chris Voss is the CEO of the Black Swan Group. He's also the author of the national bestseller, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It. Chris is a 24-year veteran of the FBI, and he retired as their lead international kidnapping negotiator. His company, Black Swan Group, specializes in solving business communication problems with hostage negotiation solutions. In addition to the FBI, Chris's expertise draws from the Harvard Program on Negotiation, the Scotland Yard, and the Kellogg School of Business. His negotiation methodology centers all around black swans, which are small pieces of information that can have a huge effect on the outcome. Not only does Chris believe the negotiation process needs to be tailored to draw out these complexities, but he and his team negotiate in a way that has a huge impact on influencing an outcome, and influencing is a key word in negotiating. Chris and his team have helped companies secure and close better deals, save money, and solve internal communication problems. Chris, it is nice to have you on the Investor Success Podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Jim, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this.
All right, fantastic. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to have you on. And the reason I'm excited to have you on is because I loved your book. I mean, I read a lot of business books. I don't read a lot of fiction, but your book is the best nonfiction book I've read in probably about a year. So I loved it. I also put it into our Mastermind online library for our members, and I'm going to leave you a review back on Amazon. Because I know how important that is. What I really love is the way that you start each chapter is almost like a thriller, but it's real life. So they're like these riveting negotiating stories with real life hostages, terrorists, kidnappers, and then you take that story and you lead it into practical ways that all of your readers can use those same techniques really in everyday life. And I love it. So you've negotiated with some really tough people in some really tough environments all over the world. And I love the way you tell that story so that people can apply the strategies. I loved it.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, we wanted to make the book fun to read, too.
I loved it. So my listeners are typically buying real estate deals, typically in the home of a seller who may be hopefully motivated to make a deal. So they may be having a tough time in life. They may be going through divorce. They may be burned out landlords who are just sick and tired of tenants and toilets and problems trying to collect rent. They may have inherited a house. They may have a code violation or deferred maintenance. But typically they've got a reason to sell a house. And they'll normally exchange equity for a fast, easy sale without having to use a realtor. And I love the way you started right off the bat where you were telling the story about walking into the Harvard Law School negotiating class and how your techniques were a little bit different, using some different strategies. Can you expound on that a little bit for our listeners today?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it was it's not so much that the techniques, some of the techniques people have heard of, and some they've never heard of. but everything is being used in ways that nobody expects. And that's why I walked into Harvard, and right away, the head of the program on negotiation, he couldn't wait to kind of test me out. And I knew where this was going, so I'm gonna lull them to sleep a little bit. That's my intention, because you lull people to sleep and you get what you want, right? So he said,
yep.
So if I was a kidnapper, what would you do? How are you going to win the kidnapping negotiation? And I said, I'm just going to ask you some open-ended questions. I said it like that, just kind of offhand, because the most dangerous negotiation is the one you don't know you're in. And at this point
yep.
in time, I know I'm in a negotiation and he does not. So, I'm working on getting him to drop his guard. So I just, I'm just going to ask you some open-ended questions, because I know that he's going to be thoroughly unimpressed by that. And as predicted, he was. He was like, really? And he just kind of laughed and sort of,
yep.
You're going to ask me open-ended questions. Like he was sure that he was far too sophisticated to be beaten by open-ended questions. And so much so that before we started the negotiation, he wanted to call people in to watch. And that's, he's drawing a crowd. It's like he's on a schoolyard. He says, hey, come on, watch. We're going to go one-on-one.
Yep.
I want people to watch.
Like being out on the
exactly
playground.
What he did. Yeah,
yep.
we're on a playground. He wants people to watch. He calls in his secretary. His secretary brings in a tape recorder. He calls in Gabriella Blum, the lawyer from the Israeli Defense Forces, very phenomenal, crazy smart person. And so we get started, and I already got this open-ended question. How am I supposed to do that? The how question is devastating. At any given point in time,
mm-hmm.
it's just the other side has no idea what you're doing to them, because people love to be asked how. And they don't know, and they never understand how much you've just perplexed them and framed them into a situation that they kind of can't get out of. And he says, hey, I got your son.
Mm-hmm.
Give us $1 million by tomorrow morning, we kill your son. And I just look at him and I say, how am I supposed to do that? And it just stops him dead in his tracks. He doesn't know what to say. He's completely flummoxed. And I say, and I got 3 more ready for him. I mean, just real simple opening. How am I supposed to do that? How do I know he's alive? How am I supposed to pay if I don't know he's alive? Because first I'm stopping him in his tracks, and then I'm creating a sequence of how I want things to go. And because I'm doing it with this, this deferential, passive-aggressive tone of voice, and he feels in charge because I'm asking him how, he's got no idea that I just laid out the sequence for everything that's getting ready to happen. And since people love to be asked, I set him up, and people love to be asked how. The how question is the phenomenal stealth attack, and people love to be asked how. They feel empowered by it, and it's a way to simultaneously empower the other side and have the upper hand at the same time. And a few how prepared questions in advance of any negotiation really put you in the driver's seat, and the other side doesn't feel it. I mean, they want to cooperate. It makes them more cooperative, and it gets them to drop their guard. It's powerful stuff.
And so 3 or 4 open-ended questions. How am I supposed to do that? I can see that working in real estate deals for sure. When an owner comes back, and I always like to try to get the seller to give me their price first, and sometimes they won't.
Yeah.
But if they do, they're always going to, you're always going to want to pull it down. And when you get to kind of that point, you could just say, well, how am I supposed to do that?
Right, exactly. And I'm sorry,
so I think it can be a really powerful question. What are some of the other open-ended questions you like to use?
Well, it's going to be usually how and what questions. And by and large, what's going on behind here? What don't I see about how you're involved in this? What's your motivation? There's a variety of things. And we like to say how, what, and sometimes why. And you never want to ask why except in certain strategic ways, and I'll get to that in a minute, because why makes people defensive and guarded. But you need to know why in many cases. So you never say, why are you selling? But instead you substitute what for why, and you say, what's behind the sale, what's causing you to want to sell. Why makes people defensive? There isn't a culture on the planet. One of the advantages we have as hostage negotiators is my negotiation skills have been field tested in every culture on the planet.
Yep.
And they work across the board. The hostage negotiators in Cape Town, South Africa, use the same 8 skills that the hostage negotiators in Tokyo, Japan use, or the hostage negotiators in Bogota, Colombia, or the hostage negotiators in the south of the Philippines. Because before we were a member of any culture, we were a human being, and human beings are pretty much wired the same. Culture is layered on top of that. And also having used these skills literally on every continent on the planet, I know that when you ask somebody why, in every culture on the planet, you're asking them why because you think they're wrong, and people have had that happen to them so many times that why makes people feel accused, and it makes them defensive. And you never want to ask, there's the only instance you want to ask why, and this is a powerful thing to do, is when defending a position defends you. And you might ask, well, why would you ever want to sell to me now? And that would trigger them defending selling to you now. It's an automatic trigger. And frequently, if I stand up in front of a group of business owners, I won't say, you should listen to me because I'm a hostage negotiator and I know human nature. I will stand up in front of a group of business owners and say, why in God's name would you guys ever listen to a hostage negotiator about negotiation? And a bunch of people in a crowd will raise their hands and they'll say, well, because you know about human nature and you probably know secrets about how to get people to respond that none of us know. And that's the way to get the other side to sell you to you. And then as you noticed before, you said before you want to get the seller to name a price because you know in a negotiation, anything that comes out of your counterpart's mouth, your counterpart is more likely to stick to. So if you need implementation of a deal, you got to get them to say it. So I use very specific negotiation techniques to get the other counterpart to get him to talk himself into my solution. And that's
and you talk a lot about this concept of mirroring works. I mean, it's a good way to keep the conversation going and learn a lot more about the person you're working with, doesn't it? It's very simple.
It's ridiculously simple, and I use it a lot, and it's also sort of a go-to move. It's a go-to move. There are 3 types in people. There's the caveman response to negotiation is fight, flight, or mate. And fight, flight, or make friends. In any given negotiation, some of the caveman is going to get triggered in your counterpart. And his natural move is going to be to fight you or to flee from you or to make friends with you in the negotiation. And each one of those 3 cavemen respond differently, slightly differently to questions, even the phenomenal open-ended questions such as the what and how questions. But they all respond the same to mirroring. They all like it. And repeating the last 3 words of what someone has just said works with the caveman part of your counterpart's brain, which clearly all the things that you outlined as to why a seller is selling a piece of real estate before, each one of those guys being held hostage by something.
Yes. You need to learn and understand what it is, right?
Right. Oh, and just recognize that they are. So these are highly emotional sellers, and that's why these hostage negotiation skills will be so effective with them. And that's why mirroring, and regardless of the caveman on the other side, mirroring is going to work.
And I tried it, and I thought it was going to be awkward, Chris, because I'm not like a salesperson, okay? I used to be an engineer before I did this, and so I'm like a math and science equation guy, right? So I thought this mirroring thing is going to be awkward, but I just did it with a seller a couple weeks ago. And he was tired of being a landlord, and he talked about how he kicked the door in, got mad at people that weren't paying him and all this stuff. And I just started mirroring back to him, and he just started, spilling his guts. I mean, all the emotions came out. And, I just, repeat the last 3 words back to him, and he would just go into a lot more detail. And, I just said it and shut up. And he didn't even to him it wasn't awkward. It was just normal discussion and conversation. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and that's the hardest thing about mirroring that people have trouble picking up, because they feel awkward, and they can't believe that if they feel awkward, that the other side won't, until they try it, and then they're sitting there like you got a guy spilling his guts, and inside you're saying like, wow, this is pretty cool.
It really does work, and it's not awkward at all. You just repeat the last few words or rephrase it a little, and they give you a lot more information. And gathering that information when you're negotiating with somebody is really important, right? And building that rapport and getting them to tell you about their situation.
Yeah, it's as you well know, it's critically important, and that's one of the beauty of hostage negotiation approach is it's a way to gather information and build rapport simultaneously, and most other negotiation approaches don't let you do that. Usually when you gather information, the other side knows you're gathering, and they become very defensive.
Mm-hmm. So it works very, very well. And I love some of the stories you talked about, but could you elaborate a little bit on the one you negotiated, say, either in Haiti or in the Philippines for our listeners?
Yeah, well, both of those are commodities deals. I mean, the horrific thing about kidnappings is, for us, it's a horrible, dangerous, emotional experience. And for kidnappers, it's a commodities exchange. And again, the secret to negotiation is one of the secrets is winning in their world, understanding how they look at things, and then using that to navigate them, because you can't beat them until you make them comfortable. And, the Philippines was, and I learned to combine skills, because we're trying to establish a relationship with a guy who's a really bad guy in the Philippines, sociopath. I mean, I'm sure if somebody took him out and tested him, he would score 10 out of 10 on the sociopath scale. And, even sociopaths, while they might not feel any sympathy for you, they love to be understood like everybody else. And as soon as they feel understood, they start dropping their guard. And we took a $10 million ransom demand. The price tag on that commodity was $10 million. And we went from $10 million to zero in one conversation about 4 months into the negotiation by just making our sociopathic counterpart feel understood.
And what's really awesome is that you saved $10 million, but you also saved a person's life.
We did,
really.
yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
And and that's priceless. So I think it was a great example. You talk a lot about using the late night FM DJ voice. Can you give us an example of how that sounds? Because you can't get it when you read. You got to hear it.
The late night FM DJ voice sounds like you're really calm and you don't want the other side to get excited, but there's no movement whatsoever in what you're putting on the table. Sounds like that. And it's phenomenal when you're going to draw a line in the sand with the other side, but you don't want them to get their back up. You don't want them fighting with you. And many times when you need to establish a real hard barrier, when we need to be assertive, we think we need to be aggressive at the same time. And when the aggression comes out, it triggers the other side's aggression. And we had a contract negotiation one time where they put a clause in a contract that was unacceptable to us. I mean, it wasn't even worth talking about. And they wanted to make the deal work for hire, and that means that they own the intellectual property. And I won't do that for anybody. We do not give up our intellectual property because that's the end of our business. And we got them on the phone. And also, simple enough, the answer, like we talked earlier, it's more important who says what. I need them to come up with the solution, because the answer to this is that the clause be taken out of the contract. And if I suggested it be taken out of the contract, my counterpart is going to look at me and say, I'll try. And we both know how good I'll try is. I'll try isn't worth a cup of coffee.
Right.
But the other problem with I'll try is when they say that, if they know they're going to fail, they've made an excuse to fail, they come back later and they said, well, I tried, which means they think you owe them because of it. And I also don't need to inadvertently trigger any amounts of reciprocity because I'm very conscious of reciprocity every step of the way. So all I did was, it was the late night FM DJ voice. We got on the phone, and I said, we don't do work for hire. Making sure I step down every step of the way. And it's calming and it's soothing, and without making somebody else feel cornered, because you don't want to make anybody feel cornered.
Right.
They feel there's no movement here. And then I shut up. I say, make sure you remember to shut the front door. Shut the heck up. And that's the effective
pausing is really important. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's what your gut instinct when you were mirroring. You mirrored and you paused.
Right. Yep.
So when you lay a specific skill out, you've got to shut up so it sinks in, so you don't step on it, so you don't destroy it. And I go dead silent after I say this, and probably less than 3 seconds, which seems like an eternity sometimes.
Right.
He says, well, I'll go to my lawyers and get him to take it out. Now, if he says he's going to do it, it's going to happen, because then if it was his idea and it doesn't happen, he's embarrassed. And that's exactly what happened. They took it out, and I didn't owe him a thing for having the contract changed.
And, you mentioned reciprocity, and it is powerful, I think, from the standpoint that if you give something to somebody, they feel like they owe you something back. Is that sort of how reciprocity really works?
Yeah, reciprocity triggers in a lot of different ways, and that's one of those ways. And that's why some people will die before they let you give them something. Mm-hmm. And you can see that guy because you give him something and he'll say, well, I didn't ask you for that. Mm-hmm. That guy's protesting because he now knows he's on the hook, and he's trying not to be on the hook. And, in many cases, you can leverage the heck out of reciprocity. Little things can go a long way, and a small gift can usually be redeemed at anywhere from 3 to 9 times its value, which the really shrewd negotiator is going to make it a point to give something early so he can trigger that. The other nice thing about giving a small gift early is it gives you a real good feedback. It's like taking a sonar depth finding on how effective reciprocity is going to be with this guy and how he's going to act about it. So, yeah, reciprocity is one of those human nature things that works, whether you're talking to, it works from the most sophisticated investor to the most unsophisticated real estate owner, seller, because they're all human beings. Yep.
So you talk in your book about bending reality. You also talk a lot about urgency and deadlines. You want to talk a little bit about some of that part of your book and some of the strategies you like to use there?
Yeah, I got to tell you, the bending reality stuff is ridiculously powerful. I mean, it takes a little bit of time and thought. It may be the most sophisticated concept in the book. And it's all about what loss does to us and what the fear of loss does to us. There's some psychologists that say literally every decision we make is based on what we're afraid of losing. And other psychologists won't say every decision, but they'll come real close to anywhere from 70 to 95%. So one way or another, fear of loss is this massive, it bends reality for us. I mean, our fear of loss magnifies a loss from anywhere from 2 to 9 times what that loss is actually worth. And that's how reality is bent. If you reach into my pocket and pull $5 out of what I have, that is going to hurt me twice as much as it would feel good if you gave me $5.
Right.
And that's exactly the issue in investing in real estate. Because you can, as a seller or as a buyer, you can make a very reasonable, well-rationed offer that works on all the numbers, but you're looking at dollars as if they're worth $1. And every dollar you offer a seller is actually worth 50 cents to him, and every dollar that you ask him for is actually worth $2 to him because of the way the mind bends reality. And in many cases, so if you take that as a given, then you can simply talk about other dollars. All right, so like how much is it going to cost you a day to hold on to this property? Because now that you've question. Right, it's an open-ended question, and you've used that question to divert them to their attention to a different place. Because you want to say, hey, listen, stupid, don't you see how much this is costing you every day just to own this? That's to come to Jesus or slap him in the face or bring him, get the reality check. And an open-ended question is a way to give somebody a reality check without making them feel backed into the corner. Like, all right, so what's going to happen to you over the next month if you don't sell this property? Now they start looking at losses. And you've taken it, you've bent the reality now, and you diverted them away from because if you're a seller, what you represent is hope of dollars in front of them. And they have this, in their mind when they see, as a buyer, in their mind when they see a buyer, they hear the birds chirping, they see the sun shining, they see manna falling out of heaven in the form of dollars for them. And you don't want that to be what you want. The more driving vision is, the thunderstorm of the losses over the next month if they don't sell.
Right.
But you don't want to back them into the corner, and by directing them to that, you need an open-ended question to direct them to that loss, and then that becomes a motivator.
I mean, those are great questions, and if people don't think about negotiating before they go meet with somebody to negotiate. And they don't plan, they don't think through what they're going to say or how they're going to present their information. And just like these powerful questions, like how am I supposed to do that? Then you talked about how much does it cost to own this property? And, they got bank payments to make, insurance, taxes, repairs. And what's going to happen if you don't sell? I mean, those are really thought-provoking questions that sort of, I think, make people reflect on the pain that's associated with owning it if you don't solve their problem for them.
Right.
So I think they're great.
Exactly. And that's why, again, then, to get away with asking those questions, you need that late-night FM DJ voice. Because it doesn't aggravate the person.
Right.
You're coming in a very stealth way. Every step of the way, you're trying not to trigger an emotional overreaction on the other side because the emotions are there. So you navigate them appropriately with, the hostage negotiation skills.
Self-negotiating. I like that, Chris. That's good. Well, do you have any advice for, a lot of times sellers don't like to necessarily tell how much they want for a house, and they hesitate to give a price. They either they really don't know, or they just get nervous about it. And you talk about using ranges, and it's like an anchor range. Does that work in that situation?
We're finding people across the board to be much more responsive to answering the range question. And in many cases, the old saying, he who names price first loses, becomes this ridiculous round and round. How much do you want for your property? How much do you want to spend? Well, how much do you want? How much do you want to spend? It can become, because you're focusing on a number. And I was in one of those ridiculous round and rounds over a fee one time. And I just, and then that's when I put it in another way, which is what we call a label. And I just innocently said, seems like you guys had a range in mind. And that was a label with the late night FM DJ voice, followed by an effective pause.
Yep.
So it was a combination of three skills. And because I know that people are much more likely to answer if I say seems like instead of what are you thinking. And also, they're also much more responsive to ask. I don't know why, I just know it works. They're more responsive to giving you ranges as opposed to a specific number.
Okay.
And then you can use that yourself. And understand the other side is always going to go to the range that favors them. So if you want to spend $100,000 on a property, you can say, well, the ranges that we're thinking about run from $50,000 to $100,000. And then, because then you give the other side an automatic victory if they get you to go $100,000. When you may have been prepared to spend much more, but you did this soft hidden anchor with the $50K, and if they continue down at $100,000, they're going to feel a victory, and when they win, they want to do it. When they win, they comply. When they win, they implement the details of the contract. When they win, they do it, and that's the that you want to instill on the other side, that they won.
So if you're gonna throw out a range, then the upper end of the range would be kind of your top price, or kind of the target where you want to be, and anything below that is a win. Yeah, anything.
Yeah, or for them, I mean, like if I'm instead of high anchoring, if I want to pay, the old style anchoring is let's say you want to pay 150, then you offer 100, and then because that leaves you room to bargain up. And then the other side is going to want to get you over 100 so they can win. But if you want to pay 150 and your opening move is 100, when you throw that out, then you say, well, the range I'm thinking is from 50 to 100. At that point in time, because with the range, they lose if they don't give you above 100. Without a range, with a single price, if they don't get you above 100, they've lost. But if you throw the range of 50 to 100, if they get you at 100, they've won, which makes them happy with the deal, which means they're going to implement. How many deals have disappeared after you thought you had an agreement? Why? It happens all the time.
It does.
But it increases the chance the deal won't disappear if they've won on those terms, if they feel a victory.
Okay. So we talked about bending reality and not going first and using a range. That's all part of bending the reality. We talked a lot about late night DJ voice. How important is it to get? In your book, you talk about getting to yes and getting to that's right. And how important is it to get them to say something like that's right?
Well, everybody knows how many deals they've had when the other side said yes and the deal disappeared. I mean, yes is not a strong word from your counterpart, because there's three kinds of yeses. There's commitment, confirmation, and counterfeit. And people have been trapped so many times by the yes momentum. Would you like to make more money? Is a classic stupid yes question. Do you want to make more money? Do you want to live? Do you want a big yacht? Do you want to live in luxury? Do you want to have 15 houses? Those are clearly traps.
Right.
And those traps are laid for us so much that yes means very little when people say it, because we've conditioned them to say the counterfeit yes. But that's right from a counterpart is a completely different answer from them. It's ridiculously powerful. It's stupidly powerful. And because it's a combination of two things when the other side says that's right to you. And that's right is not your right. Your right is really horrible. Your right. If the other side is saying you're right to you, you are in serious trouble. What do husbands say to wives to get them to leave them alone? You're right. The wife shuts up and goes
I do it all the time with my wife, Cheryl. Right? I mean,
you don't let her listen to this podcast, do you?
She probably will. It's all good. I've been married 29 years, so I've been able to navigate the river. But speaking of families, real quick, in your book, I love the fact that you talk to people that are getting jobs out of college, how to negotiate a better deal. You talk about buying a car. You talk a little bit about families negotiating together. And when I was recently somewhere, I think at the pool, and I was watching these kids in the pool, and the parents come over, and they're like, you got to get out of the pool, we're going home now. And I watched those kids negotiate a phenomenal deal with their parents. I mean, kids do this stuff naturally, and then as we get older, I guess we forget how to do it. It was amazing to sit back and watch these kids negotiate with their parents. They were really good.
Yeah, and crazy. And kids get conditioned to negotiate in a way where they're very aggressive and they don't get in trouble, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the kids are doing. I mean, they're pushing the heck out of their parents on terms, but they've taken this sort of passive-aggressive approach because they know it works and they get what they want, and they want to negotiate in a way where the parent will implement the deal and not be mad at them afterwards, because they know eventually they got to go home. They don't need an angry parent.
Right.
And
it was
so,
amazing
you know,
to
we
watch.
forget that. Yeah, I mean, we want to negotiate a deal where somebody's mad with us after the fact, and when in fact we're going to have to live with them anyway. And kids realize, look, I need to get what I want out of mom, and I don't want her to be mad when we go home, because later on I'm going to want to stay up late and watch TV.
Right. Give and take a little. That's good. And I just want to repeat your website is blackswanltd.com, and everybody needs to check out your blog, pick up your book, and leave Chris a review on Amazon because it's really good. And sign up for your newsletter, right, Chris, is what we were saying?
Yeah, the advisory newsletter, aka the blog, comes out twice a month, and there's great, short, easy to digest guidance and examples in there in every newsletter. And then when we have training coming up, then we talk about when that training is going to be and how to sign up for it. And you can go to our website and look under blog, and then there's a place to sign up, and it's complimentary. And you can start getting better at negotiation and supplementing what we write in the book, and start killing it right away.
I've been sharing your blog articles with my Investor Success Mastermind because, I mean, they're really good. And they're short, they're easy to digest, they have actionable items, and everybody should sign up for that newsletter for sure. And personally, I'm looking, as I told you before the call, I'm going to look to come to one of your training events because this is a critical skill. And no matter if you think you're a good negotiator or not, you can always improve on it. So be intentional about it and get the actual training. You don't get training for this stuff in college. At least I didn't, Chris. Maybe if you go to Harvard, you do. But you wouldn't get the right training.
It's constantly evolving. And the other thing, too, is, some people look, they use the muscle analogy. But it is true. I mean, you got to keep in practice. You got to stay at the top of your game. I mean, you don't win the Super Bowl unless you play in preseason.
Right. But you can enjoy this and just make it part of your life. I've got a friend named Walter Wolford in Jackson, Mississippi that he negotiates everything every day of his life and just enjoys it. It could be fun.
It can be. Yeah, it actually can be. It doesn't have to be a painful process. And especially if you're cutting, quote, negotiating with family members and they're feeling good about interacting with you. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have to be painful. It can be really enjoyable. It can be beautiful. Beautiful.
So just to kind of summarize here, mirroring works very, very well. I've been using it. You just repeat back the last 3 or 4 words somebody says to you and pause, and you'll get a lot more information. You can use that information to build rapport and to get people to feel comfortable with you and learn a lot more about your situation. We talked about the how question, the powerful questions that you gave, Chris, which we really appreciate. So they were all really good. Tell me a little bit about what a black swan is and why that's important as well. Sort of as we head to closing here.
All right, so there's always unknowns at the table. There's always stuff that if you found out from the other side, which they're scared to tell you, but if you could get it out of them, it would make a huge difference in the deal. Monstrous. And so that's one kind of black swan. And a lot of those black swans are stuff that they don't even know it's important because since both sides are hiding cards at the table, and there's never been a negotiation you've been in, I'll bet you, where you weren't, there wasn't information you were hiding, that you were revealing. So there's this overlap in what we call the overlap of the unknowns that neither side knows is important because they're both hiding stuff.
Right.
And if you can if you start getting the other side to reveal to you, now you know how their unknowns overlap with yours, and bang, now you got huge deals, phenomenal deals. And that's what a black swan is, the little things that are going to make big differences in the negotiations.
And going back to real estate for a second, that sort of relates because typically when you're buying a house without a realtor and it's a distressed situation and they're motivated to sell, there's going to typically be something wrong with the house or the neighbors or something that they don't want to tell you. And if you use some of these techniques, they will open up and they'll tell you about the mold in the crawl space or the bad plumbing or the electrical issue or something like that if you use all these techniques that we're talking about. So it's sort of how I see it relating to what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's always going to be something.
Yeah, there's always something there that they definitely don't want you to know, but they'll gladly tell you if you practice some of these techniques, and you'll get it out, and you can use that as leverage in your negotiation for sure. Do you have any final thoughts or tips you want to give anyone today, Chris, that's maybe nervous about negotiating or getting started with all of this?
Stop. One of the big ways to stop getting yes out of people is to take the questions that you would want to have them answer yes to and just flip it so that you get the same kind of information by having them say no. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Instead, when I call people on the phone, instead of saying, have you got a few minutes to talk, I say, is now a bad time to talk. When I want somebody to do something, instead of saying, would you like to, I say, would it be a bad idea if? Is it a ridiculous idea if? And you'll be stunned at what people are willing to say no to. I mean, just absolutely stunned, because they're no longer being trapped by yes, and no is protection. And they'll say no, and it moves things forward in just like this crazy fun way.
All right, very good. Well, everybody should go to Chris's website, blackswanltd.com, pick up the book, or go to Amazon and grab it. Make sure you check out his blog and the videos he does, and sign up for the newsletter for sure. And maybe you'll see me and meet me face-to-face at Chris's training, because I'm looking forward to doing that myself. Chris, thank you so much for being my guest today. It has been great. I definitely don't want to negotiate with you. You've been on the Joint Terrorism Task Force and working for the FBI and stuff like that, but I've really enjoyed our time together and appreciate thank you also for serving our country in sort of a unique way and creating safety for a lot of people that don't necessarily know or want to know everything that sort of goes on behind the scenes. Safety isn't something any of us take for granted, and I just want you to know we really appreciate that aspect of your negotiating as well.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Well, that's it for today's special episode of the Investor Success Podcast. I'm Jim Ingersoll, and your host for this podcast and the founder of the Investor Success Mastermind. You can learn more about what we do at the InvestorSuccessMastermind.com. If you have questions today, you're welcome to email me, jim@investingnownetwork.com. And I look forward to hearing stories back on how you are able to implement some of these very key strategies that you can use when you're working directly with sellers of houses, and how you're getting better deals as a result of it. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Jim.
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends and social media contacts, and visit us online at www.bigmoneyinvestor.com.